Joey Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630. WMAL.
6:07 on WMAL. Yesterday after the show, we got a chance to talk to the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. A lot of news about him came out yesterday. We interviewed him at about 9:45.
About 9:30, yes, 9:35.
9:35. And we asked him all kinds of questions concerning the campaign and things like that. We'll get into it. Other things happen after the show, but we'll get into a little bit later. But we started off by asking Newt Gingrich about the mass exodus that he had from his campaign staff. And I actually asked him if he felt more comfortable, because I thought he seemed more comfortable in that debate. I asked him if he felt more comfortable since, a lot of his campaigners just got up and left.
Well, it turned out to be very interesting, because the people who've been with me over the last 12 years all stayed with one exception. And the people who left and made all the noise were people who'd been temporary and who were purely political consultants. As you know, I'm a very idea-oriented, solutions-oriented person, and I've worked very hard to develop a whole new set of ways of thinking about and solving our country's problems, which with 14 million unemployed and 1 in every 4 houses being worth less than its mortgage, we certainly need big solutions to get out of the ditch that we're in as a country. And so I was committed to an idea-oriented campaign. Frankly, it was a campaign that has a lot more talk radio and a lot more internet and a lot more positive solutions rather than a traditional campaign. And that didn't sit very well. And one example is the new book that I just brought out, A Nation Like No Other, which walks people through the Declaration of Independence, the Founding Fathers, the Constitution, the very framework for rethinking where we are today. And when you start from there, you just end up with a remarkably different set of assumptions about America's future than if you start from the mess that we're in Washington. So there was a fundamental difference. I feel liberated. I feel like I'm focusing ideas, and the Atlanta Press Club speech is going to be an example of that, focusing on reforming the Federal Reserve and focusing on repealing the Dodd-Frank bill as examples of the size change we need.
Mr. Speaker, I share with you your ideas about American exceptionalism, but let me get back to the campaign for just a moment. It's very much one thing when a candidate decides to fire his staff. Some have suggested that what happened in this particular case is that the staff sort of fired you, that they didn't feel like you were committed enough to the process. I want to give you a chance to answer that criticism.
Yeah, I think the correct answer is it's baloney. We had 2 totally different models of how to campaign. They had a model which would have had me spend all my time raising money so they could spend it. I have a model that says that talking with you is part of the campaign. I'm going to, for example, there's a report I'm not going to be in Iowa. Well, I'll be in Iowa this Saturday with the Tea Party bus. I'll be back in Iowa for the 4th of July parade at Clear Lake. I think we have 12 days in Iowa in July alone.
But
so,
Mr. Speaker, when you're
suggest we're not going to be campaigning, it's just not true.
When you're running a campaign, though, is it a good idea to be off on a cruise?
Well, I think it's a good idea to occasionally stop and think. Ronald Reagan went back to the ranch regularly. In fact, during his presidency, he spent 1 year out of 8 years, 1 full year at the ranch. And he did it deliberately. He did it to think. He did it to get distance from Washington. I wanted to make 2 major speeches, one of which I made last Sunday, a week ago in Los Angeles, on 9 major changes in our policy towards Israel and the Middle East. The second speech is the one I'm giving tomorrow on the Federal Reserve System and the banking system. And if you're going to be a candidate of ideas, there's a pattern that says the candidate's job is to raise the money to hire a consultant to write the speech. Well, that's not who I am. I actually believe in what I do, and I actually think ideas matter. And I'm going to spend some of my campaign time actually learning and thinking.
All right, so if you now are going to try to run a non-traditional campaign, how do you see your pathway to victory? How do you make that happen?
Well, I think I've got to focus on ideas and solutions and content longer than the news media can focus on whatever angle of attack they want. And then gradually, I think by November, we have to have rebuilt the campaign well enough that by the time you get to Iowa in January, we have a real campaign. Remember, John McCain at this point was about exactly where I am in 2007. Rudy Giuliani was the front runner for Republicans. Hillary Clinton was the front runner for Democrats. And surprise, surprise, neither of the front runners got nominated. So I'm taking a path that is parallel to, but a little different than John McCain's. But it's a very similar thing, a non-conventional campaign. In his case, he went to New Hampshire, I think, did 100 town hall meetings. And people thought it was sort of a waste of his time. But in fact, in the end, he broke through, and that's how he did it. I'm going to give a series of speeches, and we have a website, newt.org. We're going to outline a bunch of big ideas. We have things like the new book, A Nation Like No Other. We're going to talk about the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and what they mean. And between the different things I do to communicate ideas, I believe that you're going to see in September and October a steady increase in our ability to organize and attract people, because I think people instinctively understand that we are in real trouble and we're going to need real solutions, not just gimmicks, not just slogans, but very fundamental solutions to change this country's direction.
All right, one of the things that you've been talking about with the Federal Reserve is that you want an audit, and you put a lot of the blame on our problems today on the Federal Reserve. And I guess my thought is it's kind of the lesser of two evils, isn't it? We have the Federal Reserve making policy. Do you really want Congress to be involved in that process? I'm not sure.
I didn't talk about Congress making policy. First of all, I think we deserve an audit for a practical reason. In a free country, if one person is in charge of hundreds of billions of dollars, shouldn't there be some transparency and some accountability? You can't have an argument that on the one hand the Federal Reserve is going to have hundreds of billions of dollars to give away, to loan to selected people, selected organizations, and on the other hand they get to do the whole thing in secret.
Right.
I mean, that's totally un-American, and yet that's how it currently operates. So the auditing question relates to their banking function, not their monetary policy function. On monetary policy, what I would do is I would split the banking function out and send it back to Treasury, where it could be transparent and could be audited routinely. On the monetary policy function, I would modify the current law to say that the only job of the Federal Reserve is to sustain the value of the dollar, and I'd return them to a if you will, hard currency, solid dollar basis, and tell them the Congress and the President ought to worry about job creation and economic growth. The Federal Reserve should worry about making sure that if you and I earn and save $1, it's still worth $1 10 years from now.
Okay, you used the term in the debate, caught my attention right away. You called it an Obama depression. Do you really think it's a depression right now?
Well, I think if you're one of the 14 million people who are out of work, it's certainly a depression. If you're one of the very 4 families is in a home which is worth less than their mortgage, and the drop in housing value has been greater than it was during the Depression, and there's no sign that it's over. If you look at the dangers of a double dip, and the president's callousness in suggesting he wasn't worried about a double dip, well, he ought to be. This is a fragile economy, and the problems in Greece, the problems in Japan.
Right.
There are a lot of things out there that could make this economy get worse, not better. And frankly, the Obama administration's policies are job-killing policies. Part of the reason I'm calling for the repeal of the Dodd-Frank bill is that it is a devastating bill for small banks and independent community banks, and for small business, and for home buying. It's going to lead to a requirement that people have to be capable of putting down 20% of the value of their home before they buy it. That will further depress the home values at a time when they're already have dropped more than in the Depression.
Right. Mr. Speaker, with the minute we have left here, let me just ask you this question. A lot of criticism has been aimed at your wife, Callista. Is that fair to raise questions about her involvement in your campaign?
Look, I thought it was absurd that consultants who were supposed to be on a confidential basis decided not only to quit and wander off, decided to quit and say things that, frankly, were not true. Callista's a very smart person. She's very talented. She's a pianist by background. She plays the French horn in the City of Fairfax band. She sings in the Basilica Choir. She helps produce movies. She's currently writing a children's book, so she's very talented. And she and I jointly make a lot of decisions, and it seemed to drive the consultants nuts that we actually thought together. We didn't automatically say, here, take control of my life, tell me what to do, and I'll be the candidate you want. You're in charge. Well, I spent my whole career, including the contract with America and the first Republican majority in 40 years, being actively engaged in what I'm doing. And in that sense, Callista is my partner in being engaged.
Right. But
it's my campaign. I made the decisions in the end. And I'm frankly pretty happy today not to be surrounded by consultants who I think had an obsolete way of thinking about how to solve America's problems.
Mr. Speaker, it's great to have you. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks.